Good Saturday morning. You know, I didn't really know what video to do for this weekend, but recently I've been thinking about Call of Duty 4. I've been going back down memory lane a little bit because we're old now. But we used to be young, and when I was young, I remember Call of Duty 4. And interestingly enough, they're still making Call of Duty games, I guess. I don't know why. But back in the day, Call of Duty was not 100% original. There had been other military shooters, and I believe, first person shooters. But what Call of Duty 4 did, it's interesting because I remember when I first got Call of Duty 4. I had never really played other military games before other than Black. Black was a great game on the PS2, closer to like a Battlefield sort of game, made by, or published by EA, actually. But I had thought that I was playing something similar to SOCOM. I don't, to this day, I still don't really know how SOCOM plays, but Call of Duty 4 kind of announced itself as the definitive multiplayer sim, or, well, yeah. But the definitive military sim, in my opinion. Or at least it was going for that. But we don't, people don't understand still how good this game was. It's by far the best Call of Duty. World at War is close. You could say maybe even Modern Warfare 2 is close, although I personally never felt that Modern Warfare 2 was as good as Call of Duty 4. There's something about Call of Duty 4 that's so sublime. It's just an elevation above those games. But it's almost impossible to describe the feeling of playing that game when it first came out. You could only really, you had to have been there, but I can kind of describe the experience, the story about how I came to play it. I remember I just turned 11 years old. I had some friends on the PlayStation telling me some games to buy. Somebody told me to buy Call of Duty 4. Another person told me to buy Metal Gear Solid 4. I told my mother that I wanted both of those games. Back in those days, I guess the economy was better. You could just go and pick up two games without thinking about it. So on the same day, in the middle of the summer, well, beginning of the summer, I think, June, July, around that time, got Call of Duty 4 and Metal Gear Solid 4 as an 11-year-old. I just turned 11, just had a birthday. And I thought that Metal Gear Solid 4, as much as it had been hyped up to me, was going to be a game I really enjoyed. And I put a lot of effort into fucking, you had to make an account back in the day just to play online, stupid shit like that. I was trying to impress people on the internet. But, so I got both of the games. I remember, I think, playing Call of Duty 4 first, maybe. I know there was a long time to, like, install, even though you had a disc, you had to, like, install Metal Gear Solid 4, I think. I might have played a little bit of Metal Gear Solid 4 and then jumped onto Call of Duty 4. But I remember trying to get into Metal Gear Solid 4 and played a little bit of the intro. Thought it was kind of interesting, but I couldn't really get into the gameplay. Today, a lot of people, as much as they hype up Kojima, they also rightfully criticize him. But anyway, I don't know. I don't know the exact sequence of events, but I remember sitting down and playing Call of Duty 4, the campaign. And like all the Call of Duty campaigns, what's very good about Call of Duty campaigns is you can play them all in one sitting. They take about 5 hours to complete. But it's so fascinating when you think about it because there's so much action and iconic moments packed into that 5 hours. And when you're playing it for the first time, you don't have enough time to process it. You got to play it multiple times and go back and think about it. I remember all gillied up and probably the ending of the game. But all Gillied Up stays with you. Like, that's something that's so memorable. The first time you're going through it, you're like, wow, this is incredible. And it's even more incredible the more times you play it. But I so I remember beating that campaign in 5 hours and walking away feeling impressed and like, wow, it's done. That was something that was really enjoyable. So, but I remember getting into the multiplayer of Call of Duty 4, and for first couple of days of playing it, I actually didn't like it. I actually was like really disappointed with it. I didn't understand it. It was different from what I had experienced in the past playing Resistance Fall of Man. That was the game I had been playing for a long time before Call of Duty 4. And I loved Resistance so much, and that was the best game ever made for sure. But uh, I've been getting burned out of that game too, because at the age of 10, going on 11, I wasn't very good at multiplayer. I was just a little kid playing, so I started realizing, oh yeah, I really suck at this game. I'm not playing this game the right way. As much as I love playing it, I'm getting my ass kicked here. I started to realize that, and that kind of soured the mood a little bit at the time. So playing this new game, Call of Duty 4, which I kind of sucked at too to begin with, and for a long time, but that wasn't the reason I didn't get into it. I just didn't really. It's so. It's there's so many innovations of that game, so many things that perfected the progression system of that game. You cannot think about a good multiplayer game without the progression system. It's pretty much all progression system and replayability. That's why replay value and progression, they have to go together when you're discussing the importance of and the quality of a game system, because multiplayer is a progressive ongoing experience, and it's all about the replayability. It's all replayability. If you can't enjoy doing the same thing over and over again in a multiplayer game, then it's not going to last. There was a moment that clicked for me when I was playing. There's so much we can say about the single player in Call of Duty 4. It's an astounding achievement. It's arguably one of the most perfect games ever made. It's just so good. The pacing and the writing, and it's really a time capsule. I was too young to, before I discuss the turning point for me, I gotta just ramble about this. I was too young to really understand what was ongoing in the Middle East. It's one of those games that was not so much a parody, but a self-referential. It's really a self-referential remark about the wars in the Middle East at the time, in the middle of the 2000s. A little bit of Resident Evil 4, talking about terrorism. There's a brief mention of that. I think Resident Evil 4 is also sort of a metaphor for the war on terror. But certainly Call of Duty 4 is entirely based on what was going on in the Middle East at the time. You have the Middle Eastern dictator, the threat of him having weapons of mass destruction, which he actually uses in battle. It's going to sound maybe stupid, but at that age, I didn't really understand what a nuke was. I don't think I didn't really understand. It didn't really occur to me the shock and awe mission, what that meant. I don't think I really understood what I had just witnessed. I think by the time the World War came out, not too long after, maybe I understood like that we used nukes at the end of World War II, but I didn't really understand. I remember I've told this story before. When I was in school at that time in 6th grade, our teacher was telling us about the Cold War and how he lived through it. He wasn't even that old at the time, probably like a 60-year-old man now, or maybe a bit older. In today's terms, back then he was probably 40 or 50, I don't know. He talked about how he lived through like the 1980s, and the threat of nuclear warfare was kind of a cloud hanging over everybody, and that's not a concept that today we can kind of because tensions have heated up again. But in the 2000s, there was no talk about nuclear war because America had pretty much consolidated power over everybody. There were no tensions with America and Russia or America and China. China wasn't even really in the conversation. So it was a much better time to live in for everybody. If you didn't live through that time or you don't remember, then you'll never, we'll probably never get back to the times that good again. That was probably the best time in human history. Is a small period at the collapse of the Soviet Union, the 90s and the 2000s. That was the time to be alive. Pretty much, you're not missing much if you're living today. It's way more depressing. There's still hope for us, maybe, but not much. I've already seen what I need to see in life as far as I'm concerned. I've seen the peak. And in 2007, 2008, we had the peak of multiplayer games with Resistance and Call of Duty 4 and so on and so forth. So the multiplayer in Call of Duty 4 is just the campaign is just fantastic. It's got all the right stuff. It kind of plays like a movie. Kind of piggybacking off of what I guess Spielberg tried to do with Medal of Honor. It's just so cinematic in the right ways. And like I said, there's so many iconic moments, the way that it's structured and the story's told. And he plays the different sides, he plays as SAS and then the Americans and all these little, it's almost like these little vignettes, if you know what a vignette is. These little, although it's interwoven and it's a full narrative, just the way they design the individual levels and the chapters of this game. Like, although there's continuity, it's like every individual chapter is something special, and the focus is on that individual chapter. And just the relation to what was going on in the world at the time, I feel like it was very educational. And also now it's something you can look back to as a touchstone of that time. But the turning point for me with the multiplayer was, I remember playing on Downpour one night. I was playing one evening, and I don't know if there's an exact moment, but I started playing this game more. I was hating the multiplayer. I didn't enjoy it. But I started getting kill streaks, and I started unlocking stuff, and I started like, oh wow, there's gun camos, and come to think of it, there's leaderboards, and I'm starting to understand the create a class system, uh, the different game modes. I just, it's not really a sandbox multiplayer game, but at the time, you know, the progression system, it's mostly based on performance. Although you do get the match bonus. There's one thing that I think Battlefield, you still get sort of a match bonus in Battlefield, but one thing that people used to say at the time, like Battlefield is more of a performance-based game than Call of Duty because you get kind of the match bonuses and all the challenges and stuff, which is another amazing thing. The challenges were awesome too back in the day when you would unlock. Probably Modern Warfare 2 did that system to its best, where you get the titles and emblems and stuff from the challenges. Amazing, but although it's not really a sandbox multiplayer game, in a way, you can kind of just play the game as you want. It's not really so much of a team-oriented game. And in that sense, if you want to be that person just camping for your kill streak, sitting in the corner, it's very interesting that it's a multiplayer game, but there's almost no semblance of actual teamwork in Call of Duty, not to a large extent. Maybe and like capture the flag and domination and search and destroy. Search and destroy, I would say there's a semblance of teamwork, but you're playing like team deathmatch and stuff like that. It really is just kind of like a free for all, but you're on the same team. But actually, in a weird way, that kind of works to its advantage because I loved being a little kid, just camping in corners. That's how I would play. I just camp in corners and get my kill streaks, especially in World at War. I was a real scoundrel doing that, but that was how I enjoyed playing. I love search and destroy. I love the scoring system of Call of Duty 4. You kind of had to play search and destroy if you wanted to rank up faster and get more points, because you get more points for doing everything in that game mode. And then I feel as though they sort of ruined that in Modern Warfare 2 because although you get more XP, it doesn't relate to your score on the leaderboards, which I never understood. Like I think you get more points for a kill, but it's worth the same in score on the leaderboard. It's worth more in XP, but it's worth the same in score, I believe. That's how it worked in Modern Warfare 2. But anyway, I don't know. There was a moment that clicked for me, and then the more I played Call of Duty 4 online, I became just fell in love all at once. I was fascinated by the progression system, how deep that progression system goes, the leaderboards, the stat tracking, the create a class, the perks, the gun camos, the attachments, the prestige mode, the challenges, uh, the prestige mode icons next to your name, the clan tags, and then just the fucking atmosphere and the maps. I loved every map in that game. Every single map in the game was amazing. The the game, I mean, it's just the guns are my favorite in the series. The game modes, I think, played the best of anything in the series. That was Call of Duty at its best, and it was an artistic statement, I believe. And the mockery that is Call of Duty now cannot be. It's just sad that people will think that it was always that way. I always thought, it's a unique game. Definitely not the most skill-based game ever made, but it wasn't trying to be. It's just a fun game, just kind of like almost an arcade style of game. And we need more unique games, and Call of Duty used to be unique and used to have its own particular identity. Now it has no identity, and it doesn't know what it is. It's just a product. It became a product that they were selling every year. And at the time, the output that they were doing, both Treyarch and Infinity Ward at the time, and then Raven Software came in, I believe. The output that they were doing at the time was extraordinary, but if you do a game every year, then it gets stale. It's just the way it is. But Call of Duty 4 had all the right stuff. It's by far the best Call of Duty. Again, I stopped playing Call of Duty really after Modern Warfare 3. That was the last one that I played until I got Call of Duty 4 remastered many years later. I played a little bit of World War II briefly. I'm ashamed to say that I play these games because these other games because they're so shit, really. I don't even want to mention their existence, but I played Modern Warfare 2019, which was alright, but really it's some mid game at best. That game was kind of shit, honestly. And I have no interest in the other games. But I liked Call of Duty 4. Call of Duty 4 is one of my favorite games. Amazing game. World at War 2. And I spent a lot of time on Modern Warfare 2 because I was kind of forced to. I didn't have anything else to play at the time. So Modern Warfare 2. Black Ops was alright, and Modern Warfare 3 was alright, and after that I couldn't care less. I couldn't care less. I don't give a fuck about these other ones, but Call of Duty 4, that's one of the best games that we'll ever see, and there's nothing like it. It's a fucking time capsule as far as I'm concerned. Not just nostalgia, but there was an experience of playing that game at the time and place. The people that played at that time and place, people in my age group. I was really one of the younger people playing games at that time. Not too many people much younger than me at 11 years old. 10 years old when I started playing online. And 11 when I started playing Call of Duty 4 in particular, had just turned 11 years old. The people in our era and the culture, especially internet culture at the time, censorship wasn't really a thing. Very, very minor. People were just trolling, having a good time, talking so much shit to each other. It was a beautiful paradise back in the day on the internet. But at that time and place, when we had never seen anything like Call of Duty 4, so many features of that era that we thought were bugs, but they're really features of the era. And I mean, I like the multiplayer games today don't have the same lag that they used to, but other than that, the only thing that's really improved about multiplayer is there's no lag, or not as much lag as there used to be, nowhere near, with the host migration bullshit. But back in the day, there's just it's an inexplicable feeling, and it makes you emotional when you think back to it. Listen just to the theme music of that game, looking at the menus. There was nothing like playing that game back in the day. Being an 11-year-old, just having the whole summer to yourself, and just the butterflies of getting up to play that game. The anticipation, that shit doesn't exist anymore for anything, really. So Call of Duty 4 is when we had it good, when we had it the best, and we didn't realize that we had it at the best that we're ever going to have it. But fuck these younger kids, I lived through it and they didn't. And I feel bad for them. I feel bad for you if you didn't grow up in that time. I don't know what kind of culture you guys have growing up. Not much. And we need to change that. We need to improve. But I don't know if we're going to have a way to improve artistically. Things aren't the same as they used to be. But I'm not worried because, I already lived through the peak times, so whatever happens, happens. But back in the day, we had peak, and it's just a memory now. I don't know if it's possible to get the same experience playing that game today. Especially not the multiplayer. One day you won't even be able to play the multiplayer again, but you had to have been there back in the day, because it was the people at that time. People are what make a multiplayer game, more than just the mechanics of the game. I think, for example, they probably got rid of most of the glitches, if not all the glitches. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Like in the remastered version, they also fucked with the color scheme quite a bit. Made it a little too bright and saturated. Like, why would you do that? Like, they even put a rainbow on the fucking multiplayer map on Downpour. I don't know. But Call of Duty 4, there's so much more I could say. I'm rambling, but I'm just, trying to give a little bit of personal anecdotes. This is not a serious video talking about it, but you can't talk about it anyway. You had to live through it. Like, you can dissect this, that, and the other, but the actual experience of living through it, there's no justice that can be done to it.